The call came just before my final critique. I'd been sketching a hybrid design, part Gothic, part Brutalist. My professor hovered near, brows knit in anticipation. But the buzzing phone on my desk might as well have screamed. "Mom," the screen read. I hadn't spoken to Celestina Morelli in weeks. I stepped outside. Snow drifted past the window pane like confetti in slow motion. "We need you home. Family first." Her voice wasn't warm. It was clipped. As if I were a forgotten task she was checking off a list. "Now? It's finals week. I didn't ask for your schedule, Verena. I didn't say yes. But I packed. Not out of love. Not out of duty. Just the kind of guilt that's sewn into your bones when you grow up in a family where reputation trumps reality." As I closed the portfolio, a design I'd nurtured for months stared back. "Pillars, bridges, light. You were never meant to build cities, Verena," Celestina once said. "You were meant to preserve our name." What she really meant was, don't build. Cover. I remember the moment like a scar. My Columbia acceptance, full scholarship, first-generation architecture student. I didn't scream. I smiled. Quietly. Because that's what we're taught, quiet pride is safer. But I never mailed back the acceptance. The letter disappeared 2 days later. I searched everywhere. Then I found it. Crumpled. In the trash. Behind my father's desk. I flattened it with trembling hands. It still smelled like ink and betrayal. They never mentioned it. Never explained. Just kept moving. As if my dream had been some disorder they quietly cured. And that's the thing no one tells you about betrayal in families like mine, it's always silent. Loud betrayal leaves bruises. Quiet betrayal rots you from the inside. I didn't lose my dream. It was buried alive by people who bought me the shovel. Back in Providence, the estate loomed like it always had, beautiful, expensive, soulless. I stepped through the door expecting something. A hug? A nod? A damn question? Instead, I heard muffled voices from the library. I approached quietly, half curious, half dreading. Donato's voice, "We'll need to freeze the funds before the media gets wind." "Marcella, we should have gagged the girl months ago." "Celestina, she's obedient. She'll do what's required." I stood in the hallway. Not hidden. Just ignored. There was a chair near the table. Vacant. I didn't sit. They didn't ask. Marcella turned, glanced at me like you might glance at a statue in church. "At least she looks holy. They always said I was the good one. Quiet. Pure. Unblemished. That was never praise. It was preparation. They didn't need me to be whole. They needed me to be empty, ready to carry their dirt, their shame, their version of salvation." "Verena will be taking time to reconnect with God," Celestina told the lawyer later that night. "We've arranged everything." Reconnect? I never connected in the first place. They hadn't told me. They'd told others. As if I were a press release. As if my future was their PR strategy. I smiled. Because sometimes anger's not an explosion, it's a polite nod while your insides burn. Elite families don't bury scandals with justice. They launder them with daughters. I sat on my old bed, stripped bare of personality, no photos, no books, not even the chipped giraffe lamp I loved as a child. I opened my laptop. Typed to Columbia admissions, I'm writing regarding my deferred enrollment. Halfway through, I stopped. What was I asking for? Permission to undo their erasure? Delete. Instead, I grabbed my journal. Ink bled into the paper like confession. Obedience isn't virtue when it's silent resignation. I stared at the crucifix by the window. It had always felt ornamental. Tonight, it felt like an audience. Do you see me? I whispered. No answer. Just snow outside. But for the first time, I wasn't begging. I was warning. I woke up to the smell of lemon polish and lavender, Celestina's signature blend of cleanliness and control. The halls of the estate were unusually quiet, which meant something had been staged. Again. I wandered into the dining room, expecting the usual cold perfection. But then I saw it. A new portrait hanging over the fireplace. Marcella. In white. Rosary in hand. Kneeling, praying, soft light kissing her cheek like she was the Virgin reborn. Celestina and Donato flanked her, dignified and proud. And me? Nowhere. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry. Just hollow. Where's the old portrait? I finally asked. Celestina didn't even glance up from her tablet. We needed something that reflects our values. I blinked. So I don't. She looked at me with that bone-chilling smile she uses before slitting throats. Not everything is about you, Verena. I moved closer, inspecting the glass, the paint, the fake holiness of it all. I caught my reflection. Just faintly. She didn't erase me by accident. She rebranded my sister as the Holy One, and I was just the story she needed to hide. Later that afternoon, I passed the parlor and heard Lucinda's voice, sharp and low. No, the Marcella situation is handled. We've buried it deeper than the chapel's foundation. My heart paused. I stood frozen just beyond the doorway, every sense straining. Marcella's situation? That night, I pulled out my high school yearbooks, old texts, even the locked-away family emails. My gut buzzed. There it was, mentions of a party, a priest's nephew, whispers of video footage that never surfaced. I followed the breadcrumbs. One post had been wiped clean. Another? Archived in a forgotten drive under Donato's account. I confronted Lucinda the next morning. Quietly. Carefully. I know what happened. She stiffened. You don't want to know what I know. There was a video, wasn't there? Lucinda sighed. She was supposed to be ruined, Verena. But you went to the convent instead. You were always more pliable. I didn't respond. Couldn't. I wasn't the sacrifice. I was the insurance policy. The next clue came from Celestina's office, always locked, always pristine. But she was careless that day. An envelope on her desk addressed to the Vatican, marked with a receipt from a major religious fund. I opened it. The donation matched the exact amount I once saw on Marcella's hush agreement. Next to it? A glossy Vatican magazine cover. New Faces of Faith, Marcella Morelli, Providence's modern saint. So that's how she did it. Not with prayers. With payments. Faith was never her compass. It was her currency. I felt like a fool. A well-dressed, well-mannered, obedient fool. But now I knew the game. That evening, I waited until the dinner table was set and wine was poured. I walked into the parlor where Celestina was rehearsing lines for another staged interview. Why was I the one sent away? I asked. She didn't flinch. Because you were the only one who wouldn't fight me, she said flatly. That sentence landed like a punch. Precise. Calculated. She didn't hate me. She just knew I was easy to silence. Don't dig into things you don't understand, she added. You'll burn everyone you love. I almost laughed. That assumes there's anyone left I do. She looked at me like a math problem. One she'd already solved. Careful, Verena. You're not ready to be the villain in your own story. But that's where she was wrong. I wasn't trying to be the hero anymore. Later that night, the family gathered for prayer in the dining hall. A weekly tradition that felt more like theater than faith. Celestina led the prayer, her voice soft and saintly. I stood up, ready to speak. Please, not tonight, Verena, she said, not even looking at me. I stared at her. Then at the others. They all watched. None moved. I walked out mid-prayer. Their mouths kept moving. Mine stayed shut. But not for long. Back in my room, I opened my phone. Started a new folder. Redemption files. Audio notes. Journals. Dates. Quotes. If they wanted me to be their damage control, I'd show them what real control looked like. I wasn't sure yet what my faith looked like, but I knew I had stopped believing in them. I arrived at the convent on a gray afternoon, the last leaves of autumn skittering across the gravel driveway. No one stood to greet me. On the door, a single note, "Welcome, Sister Verena." I carried my small suitcase, my sketchbook, the crucifix I had insisted on keeping, and a letter tucked away, labeled, "Not to be opened until you've settled." I set them down in the bare room and unfolded the letter. Silence washed over me. The nun's eyes weighed sympathy and distance in equal measure. I wasn't their sister yet. I was the new one. I watched a senior nun move through the hallway and heard her murmur, "Obedience is freedom, sister." I didn't answer aloud. I whispered inside, "Only if you've chosen it." Later I opened what I thought was my scholarship acceptance. The letter crumpled in my hand was my dream stained, torn, the real one still hiding. Someone had repackaged my belongings. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. My heart collapsed. I whispered to myself, they didn't send me to serve God, they sent me to forget who I was. I tucked the letter into my Bible beside the passage, "The truth will set you free." Knowing it lied there felt like setting a trap. One evening my father, Donato Morelli, arrived at the convent. He sat across from me in the small parlor, hands folded. "Verena Avellini," he said, "you are our redemption story. Every family needs one." I felt the words like chains. I asked him why I had no choice. "Because some of us have to sacrifice," he said, casual. "You were born for it." My mind cut clear, I wasn't born for sacrifice. I was trained for silence. After he left I opened my notebook and wrote, "Some fathers build legacies. Mine builds cages." During confession I tried to speak of my doubts. The priest leaned back. "Dreams are for those who serve themselves," he said. "You are chosen for obedience." I stood, mid-sentence, and walked out. I gazed at the crucifix, its metal cold. If you made me free, why did they name me captive? I didn't wait for light. I slipped into the archives at midnight. Old letters from my grandmother, Sister Amara Valli, bound to the Vatican. Her handwriting warned the future. I copied them by lamplight. Truth doesn't destroy faith, it tests who deserves to hold it. I began to craft a strategy. I would document, record, save proof until the time to use it came. This was the moment silence changed sides. They told me I was going to the elderly care home to serve and listen. I walked the corridors of the adjacent facility at the convent of St. Helena, footsteps hollow on linoleum floors. The air smelled of camphor and lavender. I thought, they're closing one chapter, why does it feel like I'm entering another prison? A little girl approached me while her great-grandmother rested. Her eyes big. Who told you to smile like that? She asked. I froze. The question landed like a stone. I forced a smile and, quietly, let it fade. I realized my grin wasn't honest. It was armor. I wasn't meant to comfort, I was meant to perform calmness. That afternoon I found Mariella again, drawing at a small table. She slid a paper toward me. All nuns painted with bright faces. My face was a blank oval. She sighed, I didn't know what face to give you, you always look like you're somewhere else. My throat clenched. I carried that drawing back to my quarters. I crumpled it in my fist, then smoothed it flat. I whispered to myself, when you perform joy long enough, you forget how to feel it. Later, Marcella came to visit under the guise of care. The laundry room smelled of starch and white robes, but the tension crackled louder than conversation. She glided past the sisters in couture and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, I should have been the one. I'm the face the Vatican would love, not you. She slipped a note in my book, you're not chosen. You're convenient. I didn't chase her. I watched her go. The message thudded in my chest. Envy didn't just shape her fate, it betrayed mine. In the library after curfew I found it, a misfiled envelope in the archive with Grandma Amara's handwriting. The letter addressed to the Vatican warned, protect Verina's line from being exploited. Another unsent note to Celestina read, don't trade your daughter's soul for your name. I sat under the desk lamp with tears cold in my eyes, real anger rising. I copied the letters into my hidden notebook. I told myself, this time, your words won't vanish. On a wet winter night I returned to the chapel but sat in the back pew. I didn't pray for guidance, I prayed for courage. My mind spoke to Amara, I understand now. They used your silence. I'll use my voice. I didn't report Marcella's visit. Not yet. Roots grew quietly beneath the frost. Someday they'd crack the foundation. The winter service had been rehearsed for weeks. The convent hummed with tension disguised as devotion. I stood among the choir, the wool robe weighing heavy on my shoulders. It wasn't warmth, it was expectation stitched into fabric. I sang the first verse, breath shallow, pulse sharp. Then the world tilted. White, soundless. I collapsed mid-hymn. When I woke, the air smelled of rubbing alcohol and burnt candles. The infirmary ceiling flickered in rhythm with my heartbeat. Sister Clara sat beside me, her hands steady but her eyes full of pity. Exhaustion, she whispered. You need rest. Rest. The word felt foreign. My body was a reminder of how long I'd been pretending to endure. On the nightstand was a card. Not from my mother, but signed neatly by Marcella. Prayers for your swift recovery. I laughed under my breath. Bitter medicine. You ever push your body until it breaks, just to prove to someone you're not invisible? I had. And still, no one saw. When I finally regained strength, a letter awaited me. Congratulations, Sister Verena. You've been nominated for the Vatican's Global Leadership Initiative. For a moment, I just stared. Recognition. Me. After years of being a placeholder, they noticed. But then came another letter. Celestina had quietly pulled major funds from the convent's ministry. It was sabotage disguised as stewardship. I called her. Mom, I've been asked to join a Vatican program. Why me? Her voice on the phone was like ice over glass. Because you were there. That's it? Don't mistake availability for calling, she said. Be grateful. I hung up before my anger could spill. Gratitude. They used that word the way thieves use silence. A week later, a snowstorm sealed us inside. The convent library turned ghostly quiet. While searching for old hymn records, I found a folder embossed with the Merelli seal, my family's mark. Inside, donation trails, shell charities, the same bank accounts tied to both the convent and the estate. I felt the air thicken. The Vatican's auditors had been circling, not for purity, but profit. I wasn't assigned to St. Helena by faith. I was placed here as camouflage. What would you do if the charity you believed in turned out to be a front? I sat there until the candle melted to its base, piecing together what I already knew. My scholarship had been sacrificed to hide their misdeeds. That night, Sister Amara found me in the chapel, her gray eyes steady in the candlelight. You look like someone who's seen too much. She handed me an envelope. Don't die for someone else's lie. Inside were letters, hers to my grandmother. Each word bled truth, warnings about Celestina, about the Merelli obsession with image. Faith without conscience is vanity. My throat closed reading it. My role was never divine, it was transactional. A bargain. When dawn came, I walked into the courtyard. Snow fell quietly, burying the path in white. I whispered to the crucifix hanging in the garden, faith is not silent suffering. I didn't shout. I didn't rebel. I strategized. I copied every document I'd found, uploaded files to hidden drives, encrypted them. I sent an anonymous tip to the Vatican's internal investigator. Not to destroy my family. To free myself from their myth. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting, it's quietly taking control. The snow thickened. I pulled on my gloves. My fingers didn't shake anymore. The throne wasn't empty, it was waiting for someone brave enough to sit. The letter came sealed with gold trim. Archbishop Leandro Corsi requests your presence in Rome. I read it twice before the words settled in. Rome. The Vatican. The center of everything I'd been exiled to forget. I packed light, just my sketchbook, the leather notebook filled with my copied evidence, and my crucifix. Celestina met me at the estate gates before I left. You knew this day would come, she said, smiling like a politician, not a mother. I nodded. Inside, my gut whispered, they reward obedience, not integrity. Have you ever walked through a door that looked like salvation but smelled like a trap? That's what this invitation felt like. Rome was marble and hush, every corridor echoing history. I stood in the grand hall beneath chandeliers that looked like frozen rain. The Vatican Commission assembled, priests, ambassadors, women in white habits from every continent. My name was called Verena Avellini Merelli. Archbishop Corsi extended his hand. You are chosen to lead the global initiative of faith and renewal. Cameras flashed. Applause rippled. But at the edge of the crowd stood Donato. My father. His eyes didn't smile. His presence wasn't pride, it was surveillance. I whispered to myself, this isn't victory. It's inspection. That evening I returned to my quarters and found a video call waiting. Celestina's face filled the screen, immaculate, merciless. "Congratulations," she said. "Remember, our name is everything. Do not embarrass us." I tried to steady my breath. "What if truth embarrasses you?" Her tone shifted, soft, sharp. "Don't test me, Verena. I can remind them of that little incident before you left Providence. The missing funds. The transfer that never existed on paper." I froze. She'd kept it. The fabricated shadow she built to keep me obedient. "You wouldn't," I said quietly. "I would. I protect the family." I felt something snap, not loudly, but cleanly. "You hold my silence," I said, "but I hold the truth." She blinked, uncertain if it was a threat or a promise. Then she ended the call. "What would you say if your own mother tried to blackmail you with a lie she invented?" The next morning, while reviewing the Vatican welcome packet, I noticed an extra document, an authorization letter. The signature at the bottom froze my blood, Donato Morelli. He had signed the approval for my transfer months before I was even notified. "He signed my destiny," I murmured. "Not bought. Signed." I remembered his voice years ago, calm as he lectured me, "Some legacies are sealed before birth." Now, standing in the Vatican's shadow, I understood. I wasn't chosen by faith or merit. I was the next link in a forged chain. But chains, I learned, could be repurposed. That night I sat on the balcony of my quarters, overlooking Rome's skyline. The dome glowed in golden silence. I whispered, "I'll sit on that throne, but only if it's mine." I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Archbishop Corsi. "I accept the appointment under one condition: complete transparency and an independent audit of the Morelli Fund." I didn't ask permission. I declared terms. They thought they were shaping me into their obedient saint. They didn't realize I had already started moving the board. Back in Providence, the air felt too quiet. I moved through the press office rehearsing my speech, checking the teleprompter, scanning the live stream setup. Everything seemed perfect, too perfect. My name was on every flyer. The Vatican logo behind me glowed like approval carved in gold. Celestina called twice that morning, her tone sugared with politeness. "You must smile more," she said. "You represent us." Us, not you. Always the same code for control. As I adjusted my mic, I remembered Sister Amara's warning: when everything seems under control, the trap is laid. She had been right before. My stomach tightened with a quiet instinct. Have you ever felt calm that felt wrong? That's how it began, the silence before the strike. By nightfall, the news cycle shifted. A video appeared online, an edited clip of me in the convent archives, crying after my collapse months ago. The caption screamed breakdown in faith. #Pray for Verena. My phone vibrated non-stop. Within hours, the world decided I was unstable. Reporters filled screens with fake concern. One said on air, "Has Sister Verena Avellini lost her way?" Celestina tweeted, "Our hearts are with Verena during this difficult time." Minutes later, my phone lit up again, her text, "Remember your place." I stared at it. My pulse slowed instead of racing. They didn't attack me, they attacked my credibility. Lucinda called from Rome, her voice shaking. "Should I issue a statement?" "No," I said, steady. "We observe. We document." Then came the second blow. Marcella launched a podcast, Verena's Story. Her voice smooth, faux empathetic. My sister always struggled with control, she told millions. She painted me as a zealot turned unstable savior. The podcast exploded overnight, charts, headlines, interviews. My inbox filled with pity and gossip. I sat alone at 2 a.m., watching the view counter spin like roulette. I sent one message to Lucinda: archive everything. We move in silence. When the world believes your downfall, what's your next move? I closed my laptop and breathed. You made the first move, I whispered. I choose the next. At dawn, I called Archbishop Leandro. The incident is orchestrated, I said. I need the press room sealed and the archives opened. He hesitated. You're certain? Yes. And I'm done being their scapegoat. Silence stretched. Then he said, I have faith in your strength, Verena. Proceed. For the first time, someone didn't doubt me. I drafted a plan, no denial, no apology. Truth, clean and sharp. The live stream would go live the next day, titled Truth Over Fear. I wasn't stepping back, I was stepping forward. That night, I gathered everything: the donation logs Lucinda had encrypted, the shell accounts bearing Donato's signature, the raw file of Marcella's podcast before editing. Each piece of evidence felt like oxygen. I wrote my opening line: what happens when the hero of the family becomes the scapegoat? I tested the camera. Adjusted the lighting. Looked straight into the lens. My reflection didn't look afraid. It looked focused. Sometimes you fight the fight before you even step into the ring. By sunrise, I had the files queued, the script memorized, and my hands steady. The world thought I'd fallen apart, but I was just gathering the storm. The spotlight turned on them, but I was ready for what they wished I wouldn't see. The Vatican hearing room smelled faintly of wax and polished wood, the kind of scent that clings to centuries of secrets. I walked in wearing a black suit instead of the habit they once forced on me. My heels echoed through marble, sharp and unapologetic. Cameras flashed, the air alive with murmurs. I heard my name, Verena Avellini, spoken like both accusation and prophecy. Archbishop Leandro stood at the podium, face calm, voice steady. Sister Verena has requested this public forum to present her findings. Behind him, I saw her. Celestina. My mother. Her hair perfect, pearls gleaming like armor. She sat surrounded by lawyers and silence. I steadied my breath. Speak your truth even if your voice shakes. I didn't come to beg forgiveness, I came to claim clarity. Have you ever walked into a room where everyone assumed your silence meant guilt? That was this moment. Except my silence was loaded, primed, and ready to strike. When I took the stand, the microphones hummed. This is not a confession, I began. It's an unveiling. I clicked the first slide: financial transfers, timestamps, bank accounts. The Morelli Foundation has laundered millions through shell charities disguised as ministries. These records come from our own archives. Gasps rippled. I continued, voice even, every word deliberate. This isn't just about me. It's about faith used as a leash, devotion twisted for profit. Celestina's jaw tightened. Her fingers, pale against the pen, didn't tremble, but her eyes did. Then came the final page. The signatures, Donato's, Celestina's, authorizing the Vatican donations that funded their public image. I was never the inheritance, I said, lifting my gaze to hers. I was always the heir. A reporter behind me whispered, she just changed the narrative. Celestina stood abruptly. You ungrateful child, she snapped, the microphone catching her fury. You don't understand what it takes to protect a family name. Protection? I replied softly. Or control? Her voice cracked. Everything we did was for you. I looked at the crowd, then back at her. No. Everything you did was to make sure I'd never be you. The room went still. Marcella's old podcast played faintly on a monitor, her voice trembling as the lies looped back against her. Their lawyer whispered something to Celestina, but she ignored him. I stood calm, watching the empire crumble. Power built on fear collapses under truth. Archbishop Leandro rose, gavel in hand. The Vatican recognizes Sister Verena Avellini as the rightful leader of the global initiative of faith and renewal. The hall broke into a low rumble of applause, flashes from every angle. Celestina's face hardened into something marble could envy. You'll regret this, she hissed. I smiled. Maybe. But I'll regret silence more. Leandro approached with a medallion, silver and gold, symbol of leadership. When he placed it in my hands, I felt the weight of years lift. This, I said into the microphones, is not your design, it's my decision. I turned toward the cameras. Effective immediately, I'm renaming the Merelli Foundation. It will now stand for transparency, education, and truth. No child should have to trade freedom for reputation. Applause rose, not the loud kind, but the steady one that carries belief. The crown wasn't what they gave me. It was what I chose to wear. When the session ended, I walked outside into the Rome dusk. The cameras still followed, but their light felt different now, warm, not invasive. I thought of Maya Angelou's words, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I carried that agony for years. Now, I'd told it, and in doing so, released it. I whispered to the evening air, if you've ever been invisible in your own life, remember, silence is not surrender. It's the pause before your voice takes aim. What will you do when the world finally gives you a microphone? The banquet table still waited for me, but I had already built a new one of my own. The envelope was heavy, thick cardstock, gold-embossed lettering. It arrived in silence, placed gently in the front hall of the Merelli estate, where the marble floor echoed with the sound of nothing. I recognized the family crest before I even opened it. Inside, the words spilled like syrup, you are cordially invited to honor Marcella Merelli for her contributions to faith and philanthropy at the annual Merelli Foundation Gala. My name was nowhere on it. I stood there, still. Celestina appeared at the top of the staircase, sipping tea, her lips painted in that familiar shade of silence. She glanced at the invite in my hands, then at my face. Isn't it lovely? She asked. Not, are you coming? Not, will you speak? She smiled and walked away. When you're expected to be invisible, you stop expecting to be seen. Have you ever been included on paper, but excluded in reality? That was the trick. They made sure I wouldn't object, because technically, the door was open. But no seat waited for me on the other side. That night, the estate buzzed. Limousines lined the driveway, laughter bounced off champagne flutes, and every chandelier shimmered as though the Merellis had never known scandal. I stood near the back, dressed in black, my hair pulled back, unseen by design. The dining hall glowed with opulence. Guests toasted Marcella, seated proudly at the head table, beneath a banner that read, Legacy in Motion, the Merelli Foundation. Not Faith Initiative. Not Verena Avellini. No mention of my leadership, my reforms, my name. A priest passed out glossy pamphlets, praising Marcella's vision, calling her the new light of the Merelli name. I wasn't angry. Not at first. Just cold. Detached. Then I overheard a guest ask, "Where's Verena?" I thought she was the one running things now. Marcella laughed, soft, dismissive. She's busy. Probably tired. You know the weight of the past. That did it. I slipped away through the service station, where a waiter stacked empty wine glasses and chefs shouted in Italian. The back corridors of the estate were unchanged, narrow, tiled, functional. In that quiet, I breathed. If I'm going to be invisible, I'll at least serve truth with grace. I pulled out my phone. Propped it against the stainless steel shelf. Hit record. My dress was plain. The lighting terrible. My voice? Steady. You can't erase a name you didn't give, I said, looking directly into the lens. They threw a celebration and forgot the person who built the stage. I'm not here to shame them, I'm just making sure you know who lit the candles before they took the credit. I uploaded it. No hashtags. No drama. Just truth. Sometimes your platform isn't the front row, it's the back door where truth slips out. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Catholic communities reposted it. Journalists called it raw grace. I heard shouting from the dining hall. Vatican officials were calling Donato and Celestina, demanding clarity. One staffer whispered Celestina's reaction, "She's gone rogue." No. I hadn't. I had simply stopped pretending I was part of their script. The family table, once rigid, gilded, sacred, now cracked. Guests looked uneasy. Marcella's voice trembled in her toast. I was never denied a seat. I just stopped waiting for one. I created a new table. The next morning, I walked to the elderly care home near the convent. The building was modest. Clean. Honest. Children ran to greet me, shouting, "Sister Verena." Elderly residents waved from their windows. In the kitchen, I served coffee. Folded napkins. A retired nun held my hand. Her voice was gravelly, but warm. "You arrived when the silver tray was empty," she said. I smiled. This table had no assigned seats. No power plays. No politics. Just bread, laughter, and grace. When the family seat refuses you, build one where real hearts gather. The throne was set, but the table I built is where I'm really seated. The Vatican courtyard shimmered beneath the summer sun. I walked across the cobblestones, the medallion in my hand glinting with each step. For once, it didn't feel heavy. Just warm. Earned. The fountain murmured softly nearby. I paused, watching the water arc and fall in perfect rhythm, something steady in a world that never was. Sister Amara's voice echoed in my head, "You were never born for someone else's table, Verena. You were born to bring one." She had been right all along. The woman I used to be, the quiet one who asked for permission to breathe, was gone. Have you ever crossed a threshold knowing you were leaving an entire version of yourself behind? It feels like exhaling after years underwater. The marble under my feet felt different. Not cold, not distant, alive. I wasn't walking toward power anymore. I was walking toward peace. The next morning, I flew to Providence for a small ceremony. The air there was gentler, the kind that carried the scent of lilac in memory. I visited the resting place of Sister Amara, my grandmother in spirit if not by blood. A small envelope rested on the stone, aged, sealed with the Morelli wax crest. The caretaker said it had been kept for years. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was familiar. The signature at the bottom, Celestina's. But the words? They weren't hers. They belonged to Amara. Promise me you'll live by truth, not by my fears. I read it aloud before the small crowd of volunteers gathered for the ceremony, nurses, former parishioners, students. The silence that followed wasn't grief. It was recognition. For the first time, I understood my inheritance wasn't a fortune or a name. It was faith made tangible. A calling beyond bloodlines. Later that week, we launched the first Morelli Legacy Fellowship inside a humble church hall in Providence. No velvet curtains. No paparazzi. Just folding chairs, mismatched mugs, and sincerity. Artists, single mothers, retired teachers, and volunteers filled the space. I stood at the center and spoke plainly. I wasn't invited to sit at the old table. So I built one they couldn't deny. One where every voice matters. Applause rippled softly, real, human, imperfect. I turned to the camera streaming live. What does your table look like when you decide its shape? I asked. It wasn't rhetorical. It was an invitation. A week later, I noticed something unexpected, Celestina and Donato walking into one of our gatherings. They came quietly, no entourage this time. They sat at the back row, blending in with the crowd. I walked over and greeted them. No anger. Just calm. Welcome, I said simply. Celestina's eyes searched mine. There was a flicker, pride, shame, confusion, all tangled. You've done well, she whispered. I learned from the best, I replied. And from the worst. Her lip trembled slightly, but she smiled. It wasn't victory I felt, it was closure. I didn't win by defeating them. I won by surviving the story they tried to script for me. As I addressed the audience, I said, success isn't measured by who you push down. It's measured by who you lift up. The words weren't for her, but I knew she heard them. That night, the fellowship livestream reached over 1 million viewers. Messages poured in, letters from older women across the US, from Europe, from convents I'd never visited. One read, "Thank you for reminding us that we still matter." I responded live, "You are worth being seen." For the first time in years, I believed it myself. Maya Angelou once said, "When you know better, you do better." I finally understood. Knowing was never the end, it was the beginning of doing. As the lights dimmed, I looked at the people gathered around the tables, laughing, eating, praying. The head table wasn't above them anymore. It was among them. The crown was placed, not by them, but by me. And now, the service truly begins. The Vatican courtyard shimmered beneath the summer sun. I walked across the cobblestones, the medallion in my hand glinting with each step. For once, it didn't feel heavy. Just warm. Earned. The fountain murmured softly nearby. I paused, watching the water arc and fall in perfect rhythm, something steady in a world that never was. Sister Amara's voice echoed in my head, "You were never born for someone else's table, Verena. You were born to bring one." She had been right all along. The woman I used to be, the quiet one who asked for permission to breathe, was gone. Have you ever crossed a threshold knowing you were leaving an entire version of yourself behind? It feels like exhaling after years underwater. The marble under my feet felt different. Not cold, not distant, alive. I wasn't walking toward power anymore. I was walking toward peace. The next morning, I flew to Providence for a small ceremony. The air there was gentler, the kind that carried the scent of lilac in memory. I visited the resting place of Sister Amara, my grandmother in spirit if not by blood. A small envelope rested on the stone, aged, sealed with the Morelli wax crest. The caretaker said it had been kept for years. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was familiar. The signature at the bottom, Celestina's. But the words? They weren't hers. They belonged to Amara. Promise me you'll live by truth, not by my fears. I read it aloud before the small crowd of volunteers gathered for the ceremony, nurses, former parishioners, students. The silence that followed wasn't grief. It was recognition. For the first time, I understood my inheritance wasn't a fortune or a name. It was faith made tangible. A calling beyond bloodlines. Later that week, we launched the first Morelli Legacy Fellowship inside a humble church hall in Providence. No velvet curtains. No paparazzi. Just folding chairs, mismatched mugs, and sincerity. Artists, single mothers, retired teachers, and volunteers filled the space. I stood at the center and spoke plainly. I wasn't invited to sit at the old table. So I built one they couldn't deny. One where every voice matters. Applause rippled softly, real, human, imperfect. I turned to the camera streaming live. What does your table look like when you decide its shape? I asked. It wasn't rhetorical. It was an invitation. A week later, I noticed something unexpected, Celestina and Donato walking into one of our gatherings. They came quietly, no entourage this time. They sat at the back row, blending in with the crowd. I walked over and greeted them. No anger. Just calm. Welcome, I said simply. Celestina's eyes searched mine. There was a flicker, pride, shame, confusion, all tangled. You've done well, she whispered. I learned from the best, I replied. And from the worst. Her lip trembled slightly, but she smiled. It wasn't victory I felt, it was closure. I didn't win by defeating them. I won by surviving the story they tried to script for me. As I addressed the audience, I said, success isn't measured by who you push down. It's measured by who you lift up. The words weren't for her, but I knew she heard them. That night, the fellowship livestream reached over 1 million viewers. Messages poured in, letters from older women across the US, from Europe, from convents I'd never visited. One read, "Thank you for reminding us that we still matter." I responded live, "You are worth being seen." For the first time in years, I believed it myself. Maya Angelou once said, "When you know better, you do better." I finally understood. Knowing was never the end, it was the beginning of doing. As the lights dimmed, I looked at the people gathered around the tables, laughing, eating, praying. The head table wasn't above them anymore. It was among them. The crown was placed, not by them, but by me. And now, the service truly begins. The light in the studio was gentle, but clear. Not harsh like the ones in the Vatican hearing room. This light felt earned, chosen. I sat in the center, webcam angled, script beside me, though I didn't plan to read it. The global chat counter ticked upward. Viewers were logging in from across continents, some names I recognized, most I didn't. I looked into the lens, and a wave of memory broke through, the first cold night at the convent, the silence at Morelli dinners, the years I'd folded myself into the corners of other people's lives. And now? I took one slow, deep breath. I am no longer someone's heir, I said softly. I am someone's voice. I stared at my reflection in the black screen. Not proud. Not boastful. Just present. Have you ever reached the moment you were meant to arrive and realized it was only the beginning? That's where I was sitting. I clicked the button. The webinar began. "Good morning," I said, voice steady. "From Providence and to the world." The chat filled with welcomes: Italy, Nigeria, Kansas, Tokyo. I smiled. I want to begin not with a title or a past, but with a promise. Behind me, the fellowship's mission charter appeared on screen. Its logo simple. No coat of arms. Just a table. And open chairs. I told them the story. Not the version people whispered. My version. How I was born into silence. Pushed behind curtains. Named without consent. How they called me an heir, then locked the inheritance in a room without doors. How I chose not to wait anymore. "When you know better, you do better," I quoted Maya Angelou. And today, I said, looking directly into the lens, I wear this not as a crown, but as a badge of service. The applause emojis flew. But I barely noticed. My heart had already moved to what came next. I walked across the street to the community hall. The air smelled like cinnamon and clean tile. Inside, seniors gathered around folding tables. Kids colored with broken crayons. Immigrants waited patiently for help with paperwork. This was the real fellowship. Not the broadcast. "Verena!" I turned and smiled at Sister Nora. She handed me a tray of coffee cups. I moved through the crowd, handing them out, touching shoulders, listening to old names, old stories. Stories of being overlooked. I was never seen until I was almost gone, a retired postal worker told me. I nodded. "Your chair was always real," I said quietly. "I just built the table." Have you ever belonged to something, not because you were invited, but because you created it? That's what we did. That's what they felt. Later that afternoon, Celestina and Donato entered. No grand entrance. No guards. I had invited them myself. Not out of forgiveness, but out of fullness. They walked in slowly. Celestina held her purse like a shield. Donato looked tired. They sat in the last row. I walked over. Smiled. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Not for the past but for what comes next." Celestina opened her mouth. Closed it. Then nodded. No titles. No scripts. Just people. They watched the program like everyone else, sang when the children sang, clapped when the teen poet performed. I didn't need their approval anymore. I just needed their witness. By evening, I returned to the studio. My office was warm, quiet. On the shelf, a framed photo of Grandma Mara. Next to it, a simple banner, the Morelli Fellowship, built to serve. I looked at the camera. Off. I didn't need it on. I whispered, "This crown isn't a symbol of victory over them, it's a symbol of service to you." The U's being typed across the world. The U's who never had a seat. I closed my laptop. The world would still be watching. But now, I would listen, too. What legacy will you leave, not for your name, but for those you touch? Because the journey doesn't end with a crown. It begins with a calling.